Hey, it's Lisa Rothman, the founder of StopFamilyConflict.com. Today, I want to talk about the things that my kids and many of the parents I work with, their kids, do that irritate them or scare them. Because what in their doing of these things, it's showing that our kids see the world very differently than we do. They care about different things than I care about. I'll move this to the first person that I care about. I'm seeing my kids and what they're doing. It seems to me that they care about very different things than I care about. I become very worried. How I communicate from worry, what that leads to, which is typically me actually not getting my needs met, and what we can do instead of doing that. And I am going to tell you a story about what happened to illustrate this that happened with my 17-year-old son, Murray. But it absolutely can happen with kids. You can work this out with kids of pretty much any age as long as they are verbal. You just be using simpler language and perhaps doing some more of the guessing and the work. So, and I have Murray's permission to tell you this story. So the thing that he does that I find super irritating and it sort of worries me, because to me it represents that he cares about different things than I care about, is the way that he leaves things in the common areas of our house. So the other day, he'd cut up an orange and left the rind on a cutting board on the kitchen counter. There was a canister of glue on the dining room table that was not closed. There were shoes all around the living room, as well as clothing all around the living room. And where I went, before I talked to him, I was feeling really angry and resentful. And I was like, oh, he doesn't pay attention to what is going on. I had all these stories. He doesn't pay attention to what's going on. He doesn't care about having common spaces that are free of clutter, and I do care. And if he doesn't care and I do care, there's what is that gonna be about? Like, will he, what could I do to get him to care about something that he apparently doesn't care about, that I care very much about? Am I going to need to now, in order to get my needs met, am I going to need to be cleaning up after him because I care about it and he doesn't? And that's going to breed all sorts of resentment. And this also gets into, of course, male training and female training about who's tracking, whether things are finished or not. And I'm spinning off into, all the ways that, maybe I certainly have been complicit in, him not paying attention to these things and not caring about these things. And so now I'm, complicit in my own, oppression around, I'm the one cleaning up this house. I was like, oh yeah, there's so much going on here. So I did a lot of journaling. I got support. And instead of doing the thing that I would be tempted to do if I hadn't done that, which I hear a lot of the parents I support doing, where the thing happens, like we see all this stuff, it's like we use the people I work with, in the past, well, I haven't, but many people I work with use language like, you really shouldn't leave your stuff everywhere. That's not how it's done. As though like there's some, like they get to decree because they know best, and it's coming from on high, this directive that all common spaces would be free of clutter. Now, I completely understand why I want this, but it's really not a decree on high that this is how the world is or how the world should be. There is no way the world should be. And so in terms of what the alternative is, it's to let go of like how I think the world should be, and instead look at what I want and what I need and what the impact on me is when I don't get it, and start guessing what's going on for him and what the impact is on him if he doesn't get it, and maneuvering from there and framing all conversations about, in this case, what's happening in the common areas of our house in those terms, because he was far more receptive to hearing that than this decree on high. I've heard this also about like table manners, like, you eat like you're holding a shovel. Like and what I mean, there, I know there's mismanners and etiquette, and like do this thing, but these are all just like, I mean, the point is getting the food in your mouth. Like, so these are, social, constructs of like how things should be. And instead, like, so well, you do that. I'm running with that example right now. So I'll do that. It's like, wow, when you eat with your food like that, what I'm aware of is I'm worried that if you do that in front of other people, other adults, they're going to question whether I have taught you table manners. And I'm worried that they're going to think that I, haven't been, an effective role model to you. And so I'm worried about their perception of me. And so I'm wondering, would you be willing to eat, hold your utensil this way instead of this way when you're out? And would you be willing to do it even when we're home, even though there aren't any strangers here, because that will give me peace of mind that when you do go out, you'll be in that new habit. Would you be willing to do that? Okay, so I just did it there with a spontaneous idea. So what happened with the situation with Murray, and then I'll also break down the steps for you after that, is so I said, hey, I checked in with him to see if he was up for, talking about it. And initially he wasn't. He was exhausted. I said, okay, when would work? He said, tomorrow. I said, great. So we talked, so it was time for tomorrow. I'm like, okay, still okay to have this conversation? He said, yes. I said, great. Okay. And then I framed it all around impact. And I said, okay. And I described, the litany of things that had happened. And I said, he said, Mom, he's like, what is the big deal about, a jacket on a chair? I said, it's actually, I want to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of impact here. And in terms of jacket on a chair, I want to get to that one last. But first, I want to get to something that had a very immediate impact on me that I think you're going to understand, which is the orange, the cutting board on the counter, because it made it harder for me. I had to clear it away in order to, start chopping the thing that I wanted to chop. And he was there immediately. He's like, oh, my bad. He's like, he's like, yeah, absolutely. He really regretted that. I said, okay, now, in terms of having stuff around, in terms of, the spectrum of impact, sort of actually in this category, it's probably going to surprise you, but we had people over for dinner and you weren't here 2 nights in a row. And because your stuff was everywhere and I didn't want people, these people tripping over it and sitting in, stuff was on the chairs they'd be sitting on. I was the one, because you weren't here, I ended up clearing all your stuff away because otherwise our guests wouldn't have had anywhere to sit. And he said, totally. He's like, oh, gosh, yes. And he explained it. He said, I just, on the one hand, a part of me understood that people were coming over, but I didn't think through the implications of what my stuff being in the living room would be. He says, I'm now aware of it. I will do, be more conscious of it in the future. And then we came to the Gorilla Glue, and he acknowledged he had been careless about it, and he wanted to do that differently in the future. And he acknowledged, he said, he'd gotten it as a gift, and so there was a way where somehow, because he hadn't spent the money, or he knew I hadn't spent the money, he was holding it with less care, and then that introduced just the point about like, well, regardless of whether we spent money on it, it's this resource, and do we want to, have something, that gets wasted? And he didn't want that either. That's not in his value system. He cares about that. So in all those areas, instead of me going, you should not, all that stuff, I was like, here are my concerns. Here's the impact on me. Do you share those concerns? Does it have that impact on you? And in all those cases, he was a heck yes, I see it. I want to do things differently. It was a very amicable conversation. And then I talked about the final piece, which was, so Murray, let's say in terms of, spectrum of impact, I can imagine that it's really hard for you to understand why, if we're not having friends over, if it's just me in the house, like, why would it matter to me whether you've got, your shoes on the floor and your jacket on a chair? Because you don't care about that. I see your room, when you when you look at those things, it doesn't bother you at all. And he's like, exactly, Mom. And I said, yeah. And so for me, when I see it, but I'm not trying to convince you to have that experience, but my experience of it is there's this way where I experience the sort of the chaos, and I find it deeply unsettling to me. And I have a very hard time relaxing. And I'm looking at these things as I'm eating lunch when I'm wanting to relax and take a break. And all I'm seeing is all this stuff that to me is out of place, and it causes me stress. And I said, but I get that that doesn't cause you stress. And he said, yeah, exactly, Mom. Okay, so now this is the point where this is where I was, most worried. Like, oh gosh, if he doesn't care about it, what intrinsic motivation could he possibly have to do something differently? And is he gonna hold me with care? And if he doesn't, what does that mean? And I think, so this is me being vulnerable. And I was like, I was thinking, I said, so Murray, you know how important it is for you that when we go on vacation, you have your phone charger and no one touches it, even when you're not using your phone charger? You know how that's super important to you? He said, yeah, totally. I mean, of course it is. And I said, right. I said, so it's not an of course for me, but I am really careful to make sure to do everything I can so that request that you have is honored by everybody, even though I could care less who uses my phone charger. So here we are, Murray, and I'm doing that not because I care about the phone charger myself, and not because we share this care, but because I care about you. And so that's my intrinsic motivation is out of care for you. And I'm wondering, out of your intrinsic motivation to care for me, because I know you do care for me, even though you don't understand why it's important to me, it makes zero sense to you. Are you willing, because it matters to me? Is that sufficient reason for you to clear stuff up? And he said yes. And he's been doing it. This conversation went real different than many, many other conversations that I hear parents and kids having from that decree, you should do this, I know best, when they don't care about the thing that I care about. It's not going to be effective. And so it's just simply name, yeah, you don't care about that. And I'm not thinking, oh, and that makes you a bad person, or, what have I done and I failed as a mother that you're fine. No. It's just, this is what I would like. And we could also certainly talk about the systemic piece, and we have in our family, where with male training and female training, a lot of females are picking up after men, and a lot of men are not tracking or paying attention to all the things that are all over the house. And that is happening also. But as a way in terms of to dialogue one-on-one, the order is, express what the negative impact is on you. See if they can understand that or share it. And if they don't, see if they're willing to stretch to meet you where you are at, with no expectation that they would see the world your way. All right. Until next time. Bye for now.